Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of ECJ, we're honored to host this panel of industry experts on an evolving and important topic for the food and beverage industry: ghost kitchens and virtual brands. What's now and what's next? If you have any questions as we go through the program, please feel free to use the Q&A button to send them to us at any time. We do have a lot to cover today and have incorporated some questions that we got through the registration process, but we will try to address any questions that you send in. And if we're not able to get to your question, we'll try to follow up with you later. This session will be recorded and we'll provide the YouTube link to participants through the email that you used for registration. I'm going to start by introducing our group of panelists today. Hossein Kasmai is the founder of the Combo Kitchen, a franchise system that allows an entrepreneur to invest in a ghost kitchen and operate multiple proven food concepts. He is also the CEO and founder of Franchise Creator, a leading franchise consulting firm responsible for converting close to 600 businesses into franchise operations. Hossein is a nationally renowned franchise and restaurant expert who has been featured by NBC, CBS News, and Entrepreneur magazine. Vijay Sampath is a director in the New York office and a member of Duff & Phelps Consumer, Food, Restaurant, and Retail M&A practice. He has over 15 years of M&A and corporate finance advisory experience. Vijay advises restaurant concepts and has deal experience in ghost kitchens and virtual brands. Brett Buterick is counsel at A.Y. Strauss, and he has significant experience counseling franchise and technology startups and representing established businesses in complex litigation. Brett has helped launch more than 60 franchise brands and annually assists more than 130 brands with navigating the complexities of state and federal franchise registration and renewal laws. And my name is Pooja Nair. I'm the head of ECJ's Food and Beverage Practice Group. I work with both CPG companies and restaurant groups on a variety of litigation and transactional issues. Today, our topic is ghost kitchens and virtual brands, and we'll be addressing that topic from three different perspectives. Hossein's perspective on the operational side as a ghost kitchen franchisor, Vijay's perspective on the deal side, and Brett and I's perspective from the legal point of view as legal counselors who work with operators and franchisors in this space. Well, first, just to give you an overview of what we'll be covering, we'll first talk about the current landscape for ghost kitchens and virtual brands, how they're operating today, and get into some of the operational models. We'll talk about some of the significant deals in the space so far, how the pandemic has influenced those, and what the future of these ghost kitchens and virtual brands concepts hold, especially as the pandemic is appearing to wind down in the US. And how ghost kitchens will be interacting with brick and mortar restaurants as we move into a post-pandemic world. So the first question for each of the panelists is that I gave a short introduction of your background, but I'd like to get into the specifics of your experience with ghost kitchens and virtual brands, just so the audience has a sense of your perspective as we get started. So Hossein, can we start with you?
Sure, thank you, Pooja, I appreciate that. I'd like to start off with a Franchise Creator, which is really the company that's responsible for franchising over 600 businesses and taking them from a concept from a single location or two location operation into multinational or multi-location operation through franchising. Combo Kitchen is one of our own brands that we franchised and we put out there because of the need that we felt was out there for the ghost kitchen industry. Now, Combo Kitchen has a very unique business model. It is a ghost kitchen operation, but at the same time, it's a franchise. Now, that's very unique because it is the first of its kind, the first franchised ghost kitchen model. But also, it's got many other firsts. And the other part of this that's very unique is that we license major restaurant brands, ones that are very well recognized nationwide. or sometimes locally in given, cities and DMAs. And then we make those brands available for entrepreneurs or other restaurant owners to incorporate into their kitchen. So this is a very unique model because it provides a ghost kitchen for an existing operation or a new restaurant. However, it's a kitchen that operates a ghost kitchen that operates a brand that is well known and well recognized, as opposed to a virtual brand that is unrecognized. Combo Kitchen operation started roughly 6 or 7 months ago, and we have had an amazing growth throughout the nation, and we're about to explore international locations as well. And to date, we have about north of 20 different major brands that have licensed with us in order for us to grow their brand into various locations.
Great. Brett, can you talk a little bit about your background and especially your experience in this space?
Sure. So thanks, Pooja. Thanks for having me. As far as the interaction with ghost kitchens in general, as you mentioned, I'm a franchise attorney. Very regularly and frequently deal with QSRs and FSRs just in general. And within the past year, ghost kitchens have really kind of emerged as a good solution to a lot of the issues that the pandemic brought about. Just ease of delivery, ease of switching to a delivery platform. So we really kind of ran into ghost kitchens and it became a natural outgrowth of my practice in kind of two scenarios. One being folks that were looking to partner with either another restaurant or operate exclusively out of either a commissary or a shared kitchen space. So kind of like a pop-up. Some of those folks would come to us for legal advice in either entering into the agreement with another existing restaurant or again, operating out of the commissary space. Generally, those are contractual agreements that we'll review. And then the second area that we really ran into this, and again, this was a kind of a natural outgrowth of the pandemic, really ballooned within the past year. And that's folks that were operating some of these existing concepts that were very social media heavy, but really no kind of brick and mortar backbone to them. And those folks would be interested in kind of transitioning into either a traditional restaurant space or sometimes just growing their brand through or either more traditional means like franchising or just using ghost kitchens as a means to do that. So we provided advice on either the expansion angle or just kind of the operations aspect generally.
And Vijay, same question to you.
Great, thanks, Pooja. Appreciate you having me. So as you correctly mentioned, I sit in Duff & Phelps's consumer M&A practice. One of the verticals we largely focus on is the restaurant space, where we advise restaurant brands across the continuum from quick service all the way to upscale dining on the franchisor and franchisee side, on sell side mandates, on capital raising mandates, and through the pandemic, as you mentioned, we're still working out of also on the restructuring side. And I think our lens and exposure to ghost kitchens and virtual brands are, heading into the pandemic, we thought restaurants, in general was seeing a lot of oversupply. And there were a lot of tailwinds in third-party delivery and online dining marketplaces, which was really driving a lot of off-premise consumption, which was further accelerated by the pandemic. And I think, even through, COVID, I think some of the key takeaways for restaurateurs is that they've realized they don't really need to rely on dining rooms and can start, figuring out how to feed consumers in their homes in a much more asset-light way that, can really drive profitability and the unit economics of their existing brands. And, what we've noticed is, the initial consumption of online marketplaces that are utilizing, ghost kitchens and virtual brands and third-party delivery was largely, digitally native, Gen Zers and millennials. But, now we're seeing that now largely includes, baby boomers and families. And, today, there are folks at home that order several meals simultaneously from multiple brands. And the proliferation of, ghost kitchens and virtual brands we're seeing, range from, name state brands in the restaurant category, from QSR concepts utilizing them like Nathan's and Saladworks, all the way to more traditional, full service operators like Brinker International and Bloomin' Brands and even Applebee's. So we think this is a growing trend within the restaurant industry. And certainly, look at it as even post-pandemic, a go-forward fixture in the new kind of rationalized restaurant world.
That's a lot that you covered, Vijay, and we'll delve into that as well. Just in terms of my background, I work with food and beverage companies, including CPG companies, but I work with a lot of restaurant groups that are smaller Southern California or California-based restaurant groups. And so from my clients, a lot of them they were on social media, but had been fairly slow to think really beyond on-premise dining because they've had, the model that they were using was very much contingent on getting people in the door and I think that's the case for restaurateurs across the country, but the pandemic forced them to embrace technology and, like it or not, to use some of those third-party delivery services. And so the idea of utilizing existing space in the kitchen that especially when they couldn't, because of shutdowns or pandemic regulations, utilize the entire dining room. I think that's been something that a lot of restaurateurs are struggling with because the economics of how you come up with your budget and your operating budget for a restaurant was so premised on the in-person dining and the cost of turnover. And they're, to a micro level, especially if you've got, a small restaurant in Venice you've got 1,500 square feet and you know exactly how many people are coming into the door. And so to embrace using the space or partnering with other concepts so that you can expand what the restaurant does and how you can connect with consumers outside of dining experience, I think is the main change that I've seen. And I think it's been initially a lot of resistance to the idea, and then it just turned into something that was helpful for survival, right? So you could not survive this pandemic with relying, especially if you were a smaller space and you only have a few restaurants. You couldn't rely on what you had been relying on in the past. And Vijay, you covered this a little bit in what you just said, but the question I wanted to present to the panel is, what does the landscape look like right now for ghost kitchens and virtual brands? And how has the landscape today been influenced so far by the pandemic? Why don't we start with Hossein? And you talked about starting this business now and just 6-7 months ago, probably due to the needs that you've seen in the pandemic. So why don't we start with you, Hossein?
Sure, thank you, Pooja. So I'd like to take it back a little bit and give the audience a little bit of a background on the restaurant business as a whole. So the restaurant operation is probably one of the oldest business establishments in history, right? It dates back to as far as any of us can remember. However, this is a business that's never changed. It's been operating the same way for hundreds of years, the same format, right? However, our lives have changed significantly. Just look at the last 10 years, 15 years. We have changed so much in the way we eat, the way we order, the way our expectations are when it comes to food, and the services around this particular concept. And the food industry is still back in the 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, they're still operating the same way. They never adapted the new form of the lifestyle post-social media, post-internet, or any of that. So that's number one. Number two, we have, let's dive into a typical bird's eye view of a profit and loss statement of a restaurant operation. Most restaurants operate with a 30% food cost, right? If you're better than 30%, good for you. If you're more than 30%, you got to make some changes. Then they have another 25 to 30% allocated to payroll another 10% or sometimes 15% allocated to rent, maybe even higher, allocated depending on what part of the country you're in, allocated to rent. And then you have insurance and taxes and you have maintenance and everything else. So when you do the math, you realize that most restaurant operations are operating between a 5 to 12% net profit. That's not a very good business. 5 to 12% is not necessarily a good business. Now, the millennial mindset came into the arena and threw a curveball at an already hurt industry, right? And that's called delivery. The millennials really are the ones that really define the whole delivery for us. It isn't that McDonald's or Burger King or the bigger boys out there had never thought of delivery back in the day. They did. Trust me, this is an old industry. Domino's Pizza wrote a book for this, right? But the problem is it never made sense. It never made sense to pay $5 or $6 to get a $5 or $6 meal delivered. It just made no sense, right? You don't want to pay $5 or $6 delivery fee for a meal that costs $5 or $6. But the millennials don't mind that. I don't know how, I don't know why, but they don't mind paying $5 or $6 for a $5 or $6 Starbucks coffee to be delivered, right? So they redefined that, right? But delivery became the norm as, for these restaurants. Now the restaurants had to hurry up and accept the delivery. Why? Because these delivery companies are not necessarily delivery companies. They're really marketing agencies. They're bringing new customers to these restaurants. Restaurant owners are looking at this as a new opportunity, new sales coming in, and they're accepting it. They're not saying no to new clients, right? But at the end of the day, I just left you guys with a bird's eye profit and loss statement for a restaurant that left them with 5 to 12% of net profit. Now, delivery fees are typically 25 to 30%. So how do you take juice out of an orange that's already been squeezed, right? And that's the problem. So a lot of these restaurants are actually providing the delivery. They're actually preparing the food and putting the box out there for the delivery guy to pick it up. When in reality, they're losing money on that particular deal. They may not even know it, right? So this is really the reason why ghost kitchens really came to the rescue here, right? So a ghost kitchen operation allows an operator to actually become profitable, right? Turn a business into profitability. Utilize the space that you already have, the rent that you pay for, the payroll that you already pay for, the equipment that's paid for or being paid for, all of that, put it to greater use and maximize the efficiency of your restaurant. So rather than seeing your cook, waiting for an order to come in, meanwhile he's standing there on social media and posting something on Instagram, now you're putting him to use and utilizing every minute that he's getting paid for, whether preparing your food or preparing somebody else's food for takeout and delivery. So this is where the restaurant industry is headed, by choice or by force. Again, this is an industry that needs to adapt the new way of life. And the new way of life is now here. So the restaurants that are resisting this are falling behind and they're losing out on an amazing opportunity. And the restaurants that are on the forefront and are really adapting this new way of life and taking on some initiatives to become involved in the whole ghost kitchen industry are the ones that are winning. So ghost kitchens are here to stay, and they're growing significantly, not only in the United States, but worldwide as well.
Thanks, Hossein. That was really interesting. Vijay, can I ask you the same question? You talked about this a little bit briefly, but from your perspective, what does the landscape look like for ghost kitchens and virtual brands, and how has that been influenced by the pandemic?
Sure. So look, I think Hossein made some really great points, and I think from the operator's perspective, I think he's spot on that if you were not keeping up with trends on younger, more digitally native consumers, having brand visibility on online platforms, you're behind. If you're not able to deliver your product or have your product consumed off premise, you're behind. And I think the pandemic, really only accelerated that. And so, I think another part of that driver is not just, younger demographics and the evolution of the industry and convenience, but I think, the same demographics also, there's more urbanization, right? They live in, high-rise buildings, they don't have cars. So I think, that convenience factor of being able to consume the same branded product at the convenience of your home or on the go versus, being inside of a restaurant and consuming it the same way, I think has become a very important element in the restaurant industry. So, having said that, I think you have seen, as Hossein correctly said, your quick service operators, operating, in a ghost or virtual format. I know Jersey Mike's said that they're going to be on college campuses, developing product and basically putting their finished product in lockers for people to pick up. As I mentioned earlier, traditional full service operators like Applebee's and even, in the leisure and entertainment category, Chuck E. Cheese, Brinker have all developed, off-premise consumable products that people can order virtually on the front end and, enjoy that same product at home, because candidly, if you're not available online, those are really lost sales, let alone lost profits. They're lost sales to another brand that is able to reach the customer.
And Brett, from your perspective, what does the landscape look like now?
Sure. So I think everyone made some really great points on that. And I think it really kind of diverges in a few different directions. And I think Hossein and Vijay really touched on these 2 points, especially with respect to the big players in the game. I think there's this general shift to providing and enhancing convenience factors to target a more digitally coherent audience. And a lot of the bigger players in the space are now really kind of moving towards that trend. And I don't think that there's really much of a way to slow that down, because I think a lot of us have really kind of grown accustomed to that ease of access, to that interaction where we can kind of get what we want at the click of a button. So I think that really, really shapes the landscape a lot. And I think it's very indicative of where the trends will be for, the next decade or so. I think also, by the same token, looking at this from a pure growth perspective, and we've seen this quite often in the space, I think the ghost kitchen industry is a very good way to kind of democratize the restaurant industry, frankly, because we're seeing a lot of folks that may not otherwise have the same capital as restaurant groups or more established businesses, restaurant businesses, really be able to take a brand that they have or a product that they have, enter the space and compete and really kind of blow a brand out through it that otherwise probably wouldn't be able to be in front of the consumers that they want to be with. And I think a lot of that is also, again, I mean, it's all part and parcel, but it's very, very heavily fueled by kind of the new marketing methods of leveraging social media, and also this ease of access and growth of third-party delivery apps. So I think it's really, on kind of the macro level, I think there's a lot of change that we're seeing where big players are really getting into the space, as Hossein and Vijay mentioned, and kind of trending towards this ease of access, this convenience factor, and doing whatever they can to make that bottom line number work. But by the same token, it's really kind of democratizing the industry and allowing folks to really put a product out there that they otherwise couldn't. So it's a very interesting landscape right now, to say the least.
Yeah, I agree. And Red, I've had the same experience. I work with, I advise some really young, early stage food entrepreneurs that have, when they think about opening a restaurant, and if they can do that, then the numbers were extremely different. And they were working towards eventually having a brick and mortar space. And I've seen that the ability to have a ghost kitchen concept or to have a part of a commercial a commercial kitchen space rather than investing the full, in the full staffing, the full, signing a rent agreement and all that has really been revolutionary, and people are seeing a lot of success with that. So that segues into the next question I had for Hossein, which is specifically about, and you talked about this a little bit in some of your answers, but I wanted to ask you to discuss some of the advantages of the ghost kitchen model.
Well, there are plenty of different ghost kitchen models out there, and they each have advantages and disadvantages, as you can imagine. But in general, the idea about a ghost kitchen model is to increase the efficiency of your restaurants, right? So instead of cooking one type of food, you're cooking multiple types of food under different brands, multiple restaurants under one roof, sharing one cost, higher sales, one cost. In other words, you keep the cost the same, you increase the sales, what you end up with is a higher profit margin. And that's really what these ghost kitchens are supposed to do, right? So some ghost kitchens, by definition, are warehouse locations or locations off the beaten path in second or third rate locations, streets, if you will. And so that to bring the rent down, and then they stick 2 or 3 or 4 concepts into one in that particular location, sharing the same kitchen and operation for delivery and takeout only. There are other ghost kitchens that basically are real estate models where they build an entire kitchen set, they divide it into multiple kitchens, and then they rent each one to various operators. And Combo Kitchen's model is very, very unique. And that is to bring a name brand, right? So you're a restaurant operator, you've been cooking whatever type of food you've been cooking under your brand. Why not bring a recognized brand that has been, has a lot of authentication behind them, there's a lot of marketing behind them, and cook that brand in your kitchen as ghost, as for delivery and takeout, right? So imagine a known brand, whether a franchise brand or non-franchise brand, one that has hundreds of locations that can now be available in your restaurant for the neighborhood around you for takeout and delivery. And of course, that brand brings a lot of value with it, right? It brings, the values that it brings with it are enormous as far as marketing and branding is concerned. That's already been done. So from day one, when the brand is launched, sales will begin to come in because people recognize the brand. There is not much marketing or PR needed. In addition, there are several agreements that have been already negotiated, particularly with the food delivery networks, where much discounted and lower fees have been negotiated already because this particular brand perhaps has hundreds of locations. Same is true for food purveyors. Your inventory cost would be significantly less for food because, again, those numbers have been negotiated because of the supply and demand. These guys have multiple locations and what have you. As each location is opened, in that particular DMA, in that city, consumers get to taste a brand new food that otherwise wasn't available in that particular neighborhood. But this, again, is food, at least under the Combo Kitchen model, that has been verified by others, right? So again, we go back to the millennial mindset. And by the way, we talked about the pandemic, and its effect, but the bottom line is a lot of people they're putting the invention of delivery with respect to restaurants on the shoulder of the pandemic, saying pandemic is the one that really brought the delivery. It's not. Pandemic really accentuated, right, this whole revolution that had been started by the millennials. So these millennials, again, the people that are mostly buying, and again, during the pandemic, what did happen was the parents and the grandparents who stayed home learned to buy from online sources, and that's why you see Instacarts of the world and you see the delivery networks flourish during this time, because again, the parents and grandparents came on board as well because they got to taste the whole industry, right? So when these same millennials like to see what others tell them, right? We go to social media to decide what to wear. Well, not, when I say we, I'm not a millennial, but I'm millennials in general go to social media to decide what to wear, what to drive, where to work, what to eat, right? So you see these young generation showing off their chocolate shakes and burgers and fries and coffees and everything else, and they're taking selfies with it, which is inspiring others to do the same thing. So when you introduce a brand new brand to a particular DMA that's otherwise never seen that brand, if that brand was to be virtual, the problem you're going to have with it is the fact that there is no authentication of that brand. There is no social media verification. There are no pictures, selfies, and what have you. Nobody else is saying that this is a good shake to have, or good fries to have, or good burger to eat. So with the introduction of a well-recognized brand, again, there are thousands of social media verification, there are thousands of reviews, and there are thousands of other, the websites and what have you. So people want to try it, but they get to try it based on what everybody else is telling them. So that is basically what the whole ghost kitchen industry is really defined as. So there's different models, and I explained to you what the different models were, but they all have their own system that really, it works. I mean, that's why this industry is thriving so much.
And that'll bring us to some of what we were talking about in terms of, or what I wanted to cover in terms of the building the brands and the role of social media. I think those are some really interesting points. I wanted to talk, Vijay, with you about some of the significant deals and players in the space to date. I mean, just in the past couple months, Walmart has announced that they're bringing, that they're going to be opening up about 100 ghost kitchens. We've got Kitchen United and Reef there, and you're really familiar with the space. So I just wanted to ask you to give some insight onto the significant deals in the space to date, and talk a little bit about the players and how deals are being structured.
Sure. So look, I think it's, as Hossein said, it's rapidly growing. And I think, like akin to a couple of years ago, where the concept of having your favorite brands delivered by third-party delivery was gaining acceptance and momentum in the market, I think the same is happening, within the ghost kitchen market. So I'd say, it's still pretty early innings as many restaurant brands across the continuum that we know continue to become warming up to the idea of and seeing the economic benefit of operating through ghost kitchens. Pooja, you correctly mentioned some of the names in the space that have attracted investor interest and are probably more prominent names in the industry. Kitchen United, as you mentioned, they currently operate in 4 cities in the US. They were backed by Google Ventures. I think they go by GV now, and RXR, which is a real estate oriented investor. Reef obviously is another big player in the space. They've raised over $1 billion to date. And they actually originally started as a kind of parking lot management company called Park Jockey before they pivoted, to the kind of ghost kitchen model we know them more primarily for today. Cloud Kitchens, I'm sure, has made a lot of news in the press over the last couple of months and years. Travis Kalanick, former founder of Uber, has embarked on this journey and has raised, I think his last round was over 700 million. So he's raised over $1 billion from a sovereign wealth fund. And I'd say, those are 3 brands that stick out. There are others like Zool and Franklin Junction that are in the space as well. But I think the thematic for some of these bigger names in the space have really been that they've attracted, VC. They've attracted VC and either kind of sovereign wealth or private investment or real estate investor interest, right? And I would say that, the name of the game right now is really to expand, the footprint. Kitchen United's looking to get to 5,000 kitchens. Reef is looking to get to 10,000 locations. Cloud Kitchen spent, like $150 million on real estate acquisitions with a specific focus towards being located near college campuses or major highways. So I think all these brands are in growth mode, both in terms of growing their kitchen footprint, but also growing the number of restaurant brands and food and beverage brands that they partner with.
And we got a really interesting question from the audience that I wanted to pose to both Vijay and Hossein. So the question was, given the influx of various models around ghost kitchens, what will be the success differentiator? What will determine the success model if they're all running after the same consumer?
Oh, I guess I'll take that. Sure. Look, you know, the market is so hungry right now that it's hard not to succeed, right? So the consumers want, look, I always use this example and I say, Netflix brought the movie theater into our house, right? And Instacart brought our groceries into our house. What the ghost kitchens are doing is bringing our favorite restaurants into our house. That's what they're doing, right? Otherwise, we could never do that. We had to get into our car, go there, and so forth and so on. So whatever model is chosen here, the bottom line is the consumer is choosing what they want to eat and when they want to eat it and how they want to eat it, right? So all of these operators are providing, at the end to the consumer, they're providing a service to the consumer. So the issue is how you get there and how profitable each model is. Now, there's a lot of real estate, just like Vijay said, it's a very, very, the real estate model it's very prominent, you know, so, you know, there are two or three operators that are playing in that role and they're large, right? So regardless of what model there is out there, you know, all of these companies at the end of the day will do very, very well. And it's good for the consumer. The consumer will get what it wants, when it wants it, right? So, you know, and of course, in the middle of this are the delivery companies that are thriving because of the rise of the ghost kitchens. They're the ones that are actually getting bigger and bigger, which again is good for the consumer.
Yeah, I think just to tack onto that, I mean, all you know, great points. I think common thematic we've seen in kind of the restaurant industry as a whole is kind of these, you know, waves of movements where there are, you know, many participants in kind of the early innings, and there's kind of a you know, normalization of the playing field, whether it was years ago, you know, the craft beer centric movement, followed by the third wave of coffee, followed by, you know, fast casual Mexican, fast casual pizza, you know, the list goes on. And I think, you know, when all of these categories, you know, very similarly were in, you know, growth mode, even, you know, third party, you know, delivery and rideshare services, there were many early players in the game. And I think, you know, some of them just grew faster than others, but I think eventually there was a, you know, settling of the field, either, you know, through strategic consolidation, you know, or some just, you know, candidly proving out their models were more scalable or just growing faster. So I think, you know, you will eventually start to see that, you know, some rationalization in the space. But also I think it's a space where, like Hossein said, there are so many brands out there, and there will continue to be new restaurant and food and beverage brands, that it's okay to have more than one participant in the space. And I think it's a category where there's ample room for multiple participants. You know, like in the rideshare, you know, community, companies like Uber and Lyft and others are able to all coexist, and even in the third-party delivery restaurant space. So I think there will be eventually a normalization into place in the space and in the category over time.
And I wanted to switch now to talk about operational issues. And I thought, because Brett and Hossein have worked together in terms of handling operational issues and figuring out operational models for ghost kitchens, I'll let the two of you talk for just under 10 minutes, like about this topic. So Brett, I'll let you take it from here.
Sure, thank you. And I'll quickly just circle back to Vijay's last question. I know it's not my topic, but I think that was a really, really interesting question that came across. And the only thing that I wanted to add was I think Vijay is going to be very, very busy once this market kind of settles out, just because if history is any indicator of where the future is headed, I think there's going to be a ton of M&A in the space and just consolidation of the brands that are out there. We certainly saw that with third-party delivery apps. I live in Philadelphia. We used to have probably about 6 or 7 different apps that we could order from, which a lot of them have folded into DoorDash. So I think just in general, that's really going to kind of settle out over time, where there is a lot of consolidation, and Vijay is going to be very busy. But to answer the question on the operational side, there's really kind of a lot going on. And I guess to kind of head this off, what I'd like to do is just break down where the operations actually stand right now, because Hossein mentioned this before, but there are really kind of a few different methods of operating in the ghost kitchen space right now. And the way that I see it, I think the easiest way to kind of break this down is in a plain V fork. So really, the start of this is going to be on the one side, operation in kind of more of a traditional shared space, commissary space, or a cloud kitchen space. So if I'm an individual that has a brand that I want to get to market, I'm looking at somebody that has a traditional restaurant to partner with, do a pop-up in, operate out of a commissary, or sign up with a ghost kitchen and put my product out through a ghost kitchen. And then the other side of the coin is more of these turnkey options that are out there. I think Hossein's concept is a great indicator of that, an example of that, a turnkey option where you kind of get this full suite package where you can operate a lot of different businesses, or you could take your specific business and operate or sell other brands through that business. So it's kind of like the pop-up shared space versus turnkey options that are out there. And I guess breaking that down a little bit further, you kind of look to the iteration of a business and what's going on behind that, what they're actually looking to do. So I think probably the best thing for me to do, because Hossein works so closely with a lot of different restaurant concepts through Franchise Creator, not just through Combo Kitchen, is start by asking what you've seen, Hossein, in the space as far as building a sustainable ghost kitchen concept or expanding. Let's start with building a sustainable ghost kitchen concept. Kind of looking at that fork, what do you think the most, or the easiest way, the best method to build a sustainable ghost kitchen concept would be? And you could take either end of that fork too, if you want to break it down a little bit further than that.
Sure, Brett. Thank you. Yeah. So, it really starts off with, first of all, you got to look at, if you're an operator, you got to look at your resources, right? So you look at your resources and see where you're not efficient. And I've used the word efficient here a few times already, but it's really all about efficiency, right? So you want to see where in your kitchen you're not efficient, and you want to make that part more efficient, right? So cross-utilize is really the key word here. We always tell our restaurant owners that you've got to cross-utilize your equipment. So you got to cross-utilize your employees. You got to cross-utilize your space in the kitchen. You got to cross-utilize your inventory. And that's a key thing, right? So imagine you're a restaurant operator. We come to you and we give you a brand. In this case would be SaladWorks, or it would be Dickey's Barbecue, or whatever the case it is. These are national brands. And, but before we give you this brand, we want to analyze your kitchen. We want to look at your kitchen to see if you have, for example, if you're taking on a brand that requires your fryer, because it's a wing operation, right? Chicken wings, and it requires a lot of your fryers, as equipment. But your fryer today is making tortillas all day in your current operation. Well, that's not gonna be a good, cross utilization of the equipment, right? Because that equipment is taken. So that's the first way that you have to look at. The first thing that as far as operation is concerned, is the kitchen operator has to look at what part of the kitchen is not being utilized fully. And then you match that with a brand that can better, take advantage of that downtime of that particular fryer or particular grill or particular oven or whatever the case might be, right? The second thing that these operators have to look at is the competitive nature of that particular food group. If you're adding another pizza concept to your operation, well, how many pizza concepts are there in that particular 5 mile, 3 mile radius for consumers to choose from? So when a consumer goes to Uber Eats because it's looking for pizza, because it feels like eating pizza, and 17 of them come up, yours is going to be one of those 17. You're not going to get many orders. But how about if only 2 came up? Now you have a 50% chance of getting that order. And because you're utilizing a very good brand, a recognized brand, you're going to win that race, 9 out of 10 times, right? So looking at this, the surrounding area, looking at your equipment, and then looking at your employees, right? Certain products that you add require certain talent. Sushi brands, for example, require a little bit more training and a little bit more talent as far as preparation is concerned than other things like burgers or wings. So you want to look at what you have, and then you match all of that to a particular brand that's going to do much better for you. This is really the operation as a whole really depends on how well you position yourself, and that really defines how quickly your sales begin to pick up, right? And remember, Uber Eats and all of these guys also, you're at the mercy of them placing you on the top of the list when somebody's looking for pizza. Well, how do they place you on top of the list? In other words, this Ghost Kitchen brand that you just added, well, it doesn't have a presence. It doesn't have a signage. So how do you get customers? Well, you're really putting that burden on, or trust, should I say, on the food delivery networks that you're signing with. So let's talk about Uber Eats. If they don't place you first, second, or third, or fourth on the list of, let's talk about pizza. When somebody's searching for pizza, if your brand doesn't come up there, you're probably not going to get that deal. You're not going to get that. How do they put you up there? Well, there's a lot of aspects here. Number one, how many reviews there are, how well these reviews are, and how well known the brand is, and how well it's done in other locations, and how receptive the consumer market is to it. So I go back to, again, by adding that well-recognized brand, you're going to get there very quickly because Uber Eats recognizes that well-recognized brand and puts it on the top because they have good reviews. So those are the aspects of the operation that make a ghost kitchen very, very strong and very profitable from the beginning, or fail very quickly.
And Brett, just because we're coming down to the last 10-ish minutes or so, we had a lot of topics to cover. There's a lot in this space, but I'm going to ask everyone 2 final questions. So first, I'll just ask a couple specific questions. So Brett, I wanted to ask you about, can you talk just briefly about legal considerations in the ghost kitchen space and trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. So I feel like I could probably take up the whole rest of the 12 minutes with that, but I'll be very quick. I think this really breaks down on a few different levels. I'll start first with the operational level of somebody that's looking to launch a brand. So if I have just an idea of a concept, a product that I want to get to market, maybe I have a large social media following. Obviously, one quick, easy way to do that, partner with a restaurant. When you're partnering with an existing restaurant, that raises concerns of subleasing. What we've seen a lot of in this industry is percentage rent, which is really interesting, and that really kind of beats down the cost of actually operating too. So you're not paying a full lease term, you're not signing up for a full lease term, you're subleasing and then giving part of your gross revenue to the actual existing location. It's a great idea. It's a great concept. It allows utilization of a space that otherwise might not be used. So the actual space concerns are there. The actual licensing and permitting that's inherent in all restaurants in any kind of locality are there on that small micro level of the actual operator. There's major concerns as far as restaurant content is concerned between trade secrets and licensing of trademarks if an operator has that. For the most part, a lot of that will be covered in, for instance, if you're using a third-party app or if you're using a service like Combo Kitchen, the agreements cover the licensing aspects, but it's still important to have good legal counsel to kind of review and make sure you're not giving away the farm on that, or the limitations or proper limitations are in place for licensing. And then as far as outgrowth is concerned, anytime you're kind of moving from that single operator working out of either a commissary or another business, there's questions of how you're going to expand, whether it's into a brick and mortar restaurant, whether it's franchisor model, or whether it's to kind of operate through one of these turnkey services that'll take your brand and kind of put you in a number of different locations. So for instance, Combo Kitchen. There's obviously a lot of agreements involved in any of those aspects, whether it's the agreement between the commissary or a turnkey service like Combo Kitchen. And then also on kind of the more macro level, when we're talking about larger brands, like Vijay and Hossein mentioned, when they're actually licensing their products, if I'm a restaurant owner and I want to have different brands that are getting into that space, I know Nathan's is really, really big in the space right now. I think at this point, as of February they operated 100 different ghost kitchen locations. Fat Brands is really big in the space as well. They projected that they would open a couple dozen ghost kitchens in 2021. On that aspect, this is a licensing agreement for the most part. It's something that really kind of has a lot of tie into it. So usually anytime we're dealing with that, we always say how much and for how long. Those are kind of the two most important questions that you really want to answer, and just drill to the bottom of it, possibly negotiate if you can, and just understand what you're actually getting yourself into if you're licensing one of these products, and just have the termination provisions reviewed and make sure that there's ample way to kind of move around the agreement. There's probably a million and one other things too to consider, but those are kind of the major aspects of ghost kitchens, both on the micro level and macro level right now.
Yeah, and I know, Brad, that you wrote an article for Modern Restaurant Management, which was helpful for people to take a look at. Okay, as we come to the end of our time, because I want to be respectful of the audience and keep it to exactly an hour. So in the last 8 minutes, I want to ask everyone this last question. From your perspective, what do ghost kitchens look like in a post-pandemic world? And specifically for Hossein, some of the press about ghost kitchens, especially in some of the industry publications, hasn't been uniformly positive, right? There's been some criticisms from the restaurateurs' perspective about what ghost kitchens could do to the future, and it's been a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there have been, in addition to the positive coverage about opportunities, there's been some doom and gloom coverage about what this could mean for the future and the choices for consumers and the quality of food and stuff going forward. I'm sure you're familiar with those articles. So I wanted to ask you basically two questions. So one, how do you respond to those criticisms of ghost kitchens? And second, what do ghost kitchens look like to you in a post-pandemic world?
Okay, so first thing first, again, I go back to the math that I gave you guys earlier about the restaurant's profitability, and I'm going to keep it very short. At the end of the day, what restaurant operators need to pay attention to, which unfortunately they don't, they look at their POS terminal at the end of the day, and the sales are going higher and higher because delivery is getting more and more. But what they're not realizing is that their profits are shrinking more and more and more. At the end of the day, guys, sales don't pay the bills. The sales won't pay your bills, profits do, right? So it doesn't matter how much sales you have. If you have no profits, you have no business, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a restaurant owner. So the delivery is here. Ghost kitchens, yes, there are some criticisms. There are some chefs that say, oh, this doesn't give me a chance to start my local business, and because of these. But the way I look at it is exactly the opposite. It gives that chef, it gives that entrepreneur a way to start his business because it fuels his business with sales. So when you start your business and you have your menu, and that is the signage you have on your location, that's beautiful and that's all people see. But in the back, you're cooking food from a known brand that's going to fuel your sales and fuel your business so that you could stay in business and be able to thrive in creating your own brand, which otherwise you probably would have failed in this very competitive world that we live in right now, right? This restaurant industry is probably the most competitive industry in the world. So I look at it in the other way and I say, ghost kitchens will help those entrepreneurs, those chefs, and those local people that want to start a new business or a new thing. Look, guys, it's going to be most likely a $1 trillion industry in the next 10 years, right? That's what ghost kitchens are. They're not going anywhere. This is the new way of life. Once again, you want to blame it or give the credit to the millennials and the Gen Z, but it is here to stay. And for me, this is all restaurant owners have to look at this as a blessing, as a way of making their very, very difficult business profitable.
So I want to thank everyone, Hossein, Brett, Vijay. I really appreciate everyone's insights. And I'm going to give Vijay the last word with that same question as to, from your perspective, what are the deal trends that you're seeing, and based on what you're seeing now, what do you think ghost kitchens look like in a post-pandemic world, and what do you think their long-term impact on this industry is going to be?
Sure. So look, I think in terms of deal trends, as I mentioned before, there are some obvious big players in the space. The category continues to grow. As Hossein said, the established chains are utilizing them as a tool. Up and coming chefs and entrepreneurs are using them as a way to upstart, bring their vision to life without the heavy investment in CapEx needed to get off the ground and really get to a run rate level where you're generating the profits that keep the lights on, as he absolutely spot on pointed out. I think from a deal perspective, I think what you may start to see happening is some strategic consolidation once some of these players, really achieve scale. I think it may have been Brett who mentioned, the third-party delivery angle, but it seems like a logical segue of kind of linking the kind of ghost kitchen, to consumer kind of travel path. I could see, much the same as like an Uber, for example, who first, acquired a brand like Drizzly, which was alcohol delivery, recently formed a partnership with GoPuff. I could see, Uber acquiring a large ghost kitchen provider. I could see consolidation on the real estate front. Obviously there's real estate element here. I mentioned, Reef and some other brands, and Sam Nazarian has a brand called C3 that's, putting ghost kitchens in hotels as well as their, existing storefronts. So I think, you'll see a lot of continued real estate investments. So, I think, the third angle could also be, strategic brand consolidators who not only want to, expand their real estate footprint, but expand the number of brands, right, that are available in their stables. So, I think this could go in a variety of ways, and I do think you will start to see some consolidation, in the coming months and years out of the pandemic. But for sure, as Hossein said, I think the way food is consumed, even with the pent-up demand, full service dining and people itching to get back into restaurants full swing, I think he's absolutely right. It's here to stay. Today's, largest, consumer cohort is a digitally native younger consumer who, prioritizes convenience and is willing to pay for it. So I think it's totally going to be the foundation for the go forward restaurant industry for years to come.
I agree. I think I want to thank everyone in the audience for listening. This video is going to be up. The recording of this will be up on YouTube in a couple of days. We'll send you the link through the email that you registered with, and it'll be available on all of our social medias as well, so you can watch the session. To all of the panelists, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. And if there were questions that we didn't get to, we will send a follow-up email. Just to end, I'd like to end these things right on time because I know people have other commitments. So I am putting, we've got a screen share up of all of our contact information. Please feel free to connect with us or send us an email if you want to follow up. We appreciate everyone's time for attending, and the panelists, thank you so much for your insight. We had a lot to cover. I know there was topics that we had that we didn't get to, but this was a rich discussion, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you for having us.
you moderating.